Hello everyone, welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you join us live, super happy to have you. If at any point you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I have it pulled up here on my phone. I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on things, see if we can kind of get a conversation started. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, why not subscribe, right? If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes in the description so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And same deal as before. If you haven't already, please like this video and do not forget to subscribe. Oh, give me 1 second. I'm having some issues here. Give me 1 second. This is so embarrassing. For some reason, OBS is not working today. This is so embarrassing. Why is this not working? All right, here we go. All right, there we go. All right. So let's talk about the box office, but actually give me 1 second. I don't know why this is not working. Okay, we're gonna have to do some in the moment editing. For some reason the output resolutions are all fucked up on OBS. But let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total, actually I've decided I'm not gonna give the total domestic box office anymore because I don't think anyone cares enough about that. So we're gonna just take a look here at the box. This is really going well, this episode here. So the biggest new film this past week was the John Wick spin-off Ballerina from the world of John Wick at number 3. You love that corporate-y from the world of John Wick, right? Opened around $24.5 million, which was below the projections, even the lowest end of those projections, which, again, I was not surprised by. I feel like the John Wick brand has never been as strong as people think it is. It's a cult classic, right? But the thing about cult classics is they're not popular classics, right? They have a very niche, limited fan base. And I feel like, they've done 4 John Wick movies. Does anyone really care all that much about a spin-off? Not even with John Wick. Even if it was John Wick 5, I would be doubtful of the film's ability to, perform really, really well. But this isn't even John Wick 5. It's from the world of John Wick Ballerina. Critics were kind of, mixed on it. Audiences seem to like it well enough. But again, the real tell will be, can it kind of hold week after week? And considering there's so many other, I don't even want to say action films, but you have Thunderbolts, still here in the top 10, right? Dropping from 6th to 9th place now, but it's in its 6th week. Critics liked that one a lot more. Audiences liked that. It's still chugging along. It finally crossed over into profitability, I think, a week or 2 ago. But things like Thunderbolts are still here. Mission Impossible is here. So I feel like Ballerina just doesn't have a place in this market right now. This brings its worldwide total, though, to 50 million, 50 and a half, but it cost 90 million to make. So this is still very much a negative return. And, again, maybe those international audiences will help. As you can see here, more than half of its worldwide box office is coming from overseas, right? The only other new movie here was Dan Evil Eye at number 10. This is from my understanding, this is just a episode compilation of like 3 episodes of the newest season of an anime. And again, with releases like this, it's interesting when they break into the top 10. And also, interestingly, most of its worldwide box office is coming from the United States. Because typically when these things release, they've already been playing internationally, particularly in Japan. So this will just kind of be like the icing on the cake. But again, this is still kind of icing on the cake because, it's a television anime first. And this is really just to kind of get the word out, kind of build more brand awareness, and just squeeze every dollar out of fans who would have watched it on TV anyway, but are willing to pay extra to see it on the big screen, and they'll probably still watch it when it airs on TV, right? But this top 10 is more or less where we left it last week. Lilo and Stitch obviously still here at number 1 in its third week now. $57 million for the week. For its third week. That's really strong, right? It had a 57% drop from the previous week. But again, this is already a mammothly successful endeavor for Disney. Bringing in, I mean, we're looking at almost 700, I think more than 750 million worldwide off of just a $100 million budget. So, Disney, the last year has been Disney being rewarded for doing the bare minimum, right? Deadpool and Wolverine, Moana 2, Inside Out 2, Lilo and Stitch, like these just continuations of, and not even good continuations. Like I have not seen Moana 2 or this Lilo and Stitch movie, but I did see Inside Out 2, and I'm not a big fan of the original Inside Out, but this one was also middling for me. So Disney, but they've all 4 of the films that I've mentioned here, that Disney's put out that I've pointed to, have all done incredibly well. So of course Disney is going to learn the wrong lessons from this. You would think that they would learn after the failure of Snow White, like, okay, we need to actually, we can't just become like this echo chamber. But I think the lesson that they're learning is, we can be an echo chamber. We just have to make sure we're picking the right properties to be an echo chamber for, right? Snow White, who gives a shit? Lilo and Stitch, people love, right? That's probably their thinking here. It's not an issue of the strategy as a whole, but rather what films they're implementing the strategy with. Fuck this new Lilo and Stitch movie. From my understanding, it completely undermines the whole thematic purpose of the original film. I'm fine with remakes and reimaginings changing things about the source material, but when they change, again, the core thematic idea, and replace it with something not nearly as well thought out or complex or nuanced, but very boilerplate and just inferior, that's when I have an issue, right? Again, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning is still here at second place in its third week. Again, critics and audiences like this. Critics like this obviously a lot more than Lilo and Stitch. Though I'm surprised it's not higher. You would, based off film Twitter, you would think that this Mission Impossible movie would have 100% critic score. They're like, this is true cinema. But I think people forget it's also just a very entertaining, but nevertheless, it's just like a studio action series, right? With really impressive stunt work by Tom Cruise, right? Worldwide, it's made a little over $450 million, but again, it cost $400 million to make because they paid the crew through COVID, even when they weren't, when they basically paused production. So this is technically Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 2, but they changed the name because that ended up not doing very well. So they changed the branding of it. But so again, it's very unlikely that this is going to hit 800 million, which is a shame because again, this is a franchise going back, almost 30 years now. I think it was the mid 90s that first movie came out, the Brian De Palma movie, right? So for it to end on a note of essentially a financial flop, is probably a little bit disappointing, but again, I'm sure, nothing is ever truly dead in Hollywood, right? Viviana is putting here in the comments, quoting me, Disney will take the wrong lessons from this, but then she follows up with, but the lesson is follow the money. Exactly, right? But I would also argue it's like, is it the chicken or the egg, right? Do these movies make a lot of money because audiences want this, or do audiences want this because Disney pushes them out and puts all of their marketing weight behind them, right? And I think this is a great, and I'm really glad you make this comment because, just look at something like Sinners here, right? Dropping from 5th to 8th place out of the top 5, but in its 8th frame, still here, this, not independent, but, original, black-led, but black, performers and creatives both in front of and behind the camera, doing so well, right? Critics and audiences love this movie. The legs on this has been a, very consistent week after week after week. It's made over $350 million off of just a $90 million budget. So when you give audiences something original and that's high quality, they will go, right? There has to be a certain level of marketability, right? Like, you're not going to have people go see Citizen Kane. Like, if you make Citizen Kane, that people aren't going to want to go. It's not going to be this, even though it's amazing, at least in my opinion. But, like, as long as you kind of put on, like, the veneer of something, like, more conventional, people will go to these movies. So, yes, follow the money, but I feel like it's like, do they reinforce people's tastes? People's tastes are formed by what they're able, you can't develop your taste culinarily if all you have access to is McDonald's, right? So you can't just say, well, we're giving them McDonald's because that's what they want. It's like, yeah, because they haven't developed their palate because you haven't given them anything else. So again, it's not necessarily like the worst thing in the world. It's just that when their entire financial weight is put behind just a couple tentpole movies that are very generic, and because they're so expensive, they have to make so much. That's the issue, and that's why I always like to put the percent return, because a movie cannot make a lot, but if it didn't cost a lot, it can be financially viable. But when you have a movie cost $400 million, you need to make like 800 just to break even. So in order to make that much money, you have to make a movie, palatable to as many people as possible, and therefore you're taking less creative risks. So it's literally the exact tension between art and commerce, right? Where when you make it so expensive, you are putting yourself in a position where you can't make something really creative or high quality. So that's really unfortunate. Because again, you can again have good percent returns. I mean, look at Final Destination Bloodlines, right? Only cost $50 million, but it's made over $250 million worldwide. So while that pales in comparison to some of these other bigger movies, 400% return, right? Like that is a bigger percent return than Sinners, right? Despite Sinners making more money, because Sinners cost more money, right? And it's just a shame that we don't get the opportunity to see different kinds of movies. And I speak nostalgically about a period that was literally like a couple weeks ago, but there was one week where the top 10 was so diverse. It was like an original film, a sequel, a spin-off, a remake, a re-release of an older movie, a documentary. Like, it was so many different kinds of things, right? And I think that's the big issue with the box office and the American film landscape today, is that, there's just too many, or rather not even too many, there's just not enough, opportunities for different kinds of films to find their niche, and I think that's a shame. Okay, looking ahead to this upcoming week. So I've changed up my upcoming releases format here, where I have another chart, right? I'm not only going to just show the upcoming week, but as far out as I'm able to get predictions on from other sources. So looking ahead to this specific week, though, we have the How to Train Your Dragon. Speaking of remaking animated films, we have How to Train Your Dragon. It's projected to make around 67 to 100 million. I'm going to put the target around 79. Again, like, the fact that this is going to be one of the bigger films of the summer is just disappointing, especially for a movie like this, because at least like the Snow White movie, and even the Lilo and Stitch, for all its faults, like, was not a shot-for-shot remake of the original. At least based off the trailers, this is like literally a shot-for-shot remake. Which is insane, right? So the fact that this is going to make so much money when you can literally just watch the animated movie and it's probably going to be better, it's just disappointing, because people feel like, it needs to be in live action for it to be validated in some way, right? Vivian also puts in the comments, this is still relevant. People definitely will like what they're given, because I don't think anyone asked for a Lilo and Stitch live action remake. Exactly. And also the fact that they even made that speaks to that they're really starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel. Not because a Lilo and Stitch is bad. If anything, it's like one of, if not the best Disney movie. But it's like not the one that's most obvious for a remake, right? So again, no one, and Vivian also puts, revive the brand, sure, but not make it into one of the chain of crappy live action remakes. Exactly. Like, because Lilo and Stitch apparently is very, very popular overseas. So I think a lot of people have theorized that they made this movie as a way to kind of like reinvigorate the brand, sell some more merch, kind of keep that brand alive. It's very, very popular in other parts of the world, particularly Asia, particularly Japan. But anyways, How to Train Your Dragon. Again, I laid out those projections. Also, we have The Materialists, which is a A24 film from Celine Song, I believe, who did Past Lives, which was a great movie. But apparently this movie, Materialist, isn't getting so great reviews. But I'll wait for my judgment on that until it comes out. It's projected to make around 5 to 13. I'm going to put the target around 9.5 million. Somewhere kind of like in the middle there. Again, smaller fare, but if we just made more smaller movies, we would just be better fed. It would be more nutritious meals. And then you wouldn't have to worry about this one film making a gazillion dollars because you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? We also have a Miley Cyrus, not even a documentary, like a visual album movie. Miley Cyrus, Something Beautiful, to accompany her new album. This is coming out on Thursday. Projected to make around 1 to 3 million. I'm going to put the target around 1.7, a little bit closer to that 2 mark, right? Miley Cyrus is interesting that she's kind of like made a comeback like 3 different times. So I don't know where we are in that arc of Miley Cyrus, but I'm always a big fan of some OG Hannah Montana, the Meet Miley Cyrus double side album with Hannah Montana 2. I'm really showing both my age and my weirdness that I love early Hannah Montana music. And it's not just nostalgic. Some of these songs actually slap. And then we also have the Unholy Trinity. This is let me confirm what this is. Again, it's like one of these random cheap action films, Western action films that just has aging action stars like Pierce Brosnan and Sam Jackson. Again, very, very small projection, only projected to make around 1 to 2 million. I'm gonna put my projection literally at the bottom, right? At 1 million. And then again, you can see some other films here. Obviously, the biggest one that's coming up in the next couple of weeks is Superman. We're looking at something like $185 million topping those projections. I feel like it's going to be even more. I feel like this is going to be the biggest movie of the summer. I could be wrong though, right? Because we do also have Fantastic Four later in the summer. But this is definitely going to be the biggest film up to that point. For sure. And before I move on, Viviana also writes the comments, Sinners was phenomenal, such a big risk, so creative, black leads, great score. It's really a taste of the stuff that we should be getting, not just remakes and continuing franchises. Again, 100% agree that it's just, art is about communication. Sometimes it's very utilitarian, like a sign on the street, but then other times it's about communicating something about the human condition, right? So films are art. Anything humans make is art, right? A chair is art. So when a film is soulless and lifeless, it's just empty words, right? And where something like Sinners feels like, for better or for worse, because that movie's one of my favorites of the year, but it is kind of messy, but at least it's messy, but there's a person behind it, right? There's someone wrestling with something, right? So again, I really hope I hope and pray that the industry really kind of moves towards, because again, we're still in this transitional post-COVID, post-mega blockbuster period of the 2010s. And I think people are okay, we're past that, we're past the moment of transition. I think we're still in a moment of transition. That's going to be, if it started during COVID, it could take 10, even 15 years. I'm hoping part of that transition, you see a lot more bigger swings from an industry that is dying, right? And eventually they're going to get to the point, kind of like in the 60s, where they were just kind of we don't even know what to do. Here's the keys to the kingdom, all you young, ambitious filmmakers. Just make whatever. And that's how we got the new Hollywood, the Hollywood Renaissance period, right? Okay, before moving on, just want to give another quick plug to the another YouTube channel that I recently started called Replay Rewind. 1,000 video games across 50 years of gaming history. Can I play them all before I die? Well, we're going to find out. So, this is my attempt to play through all these games, most of which I've never played before, to kind of trace the development of the medium game by game. It's been a lot of fun so far. It would really mean the world to me if you could go check that out. You can find a link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Hold on. I'm glad I was able to fix my my OBS. Not my IBS. I don't have IBS. Anyway, let's talk about story number 1. So it's official. Microsoft is partnering with Asus to create and release a handheld Xbox set to release this holiday season. There's going to be 2 variations. There'll be the Rogue Xbox Ally, as well as the Rogue Xbox Ally X, which you can imagine the X is going to be like a more powerful version of the base version. A little quote here from Xbox announcing this, saying, quote, "The Xbox Ally offers great value for anyone looking to take their favorite games wherever they want to play," end quote. So this is the culmination of a long-running rumor analysis. I mean, I've been talking about this since more or less since I started this channel. It was one of my earlier videos, like within the first couple of months, about a rumored Xbox handheld. And because Xbox as a gaming brand, so a little bit of history, right? So Microsoft, of course, infamous isn't the right word. I don't know why I'm saying infamous, but are the creators of Windows, right? Arguably the most popular operating system of all time. No, it is the most popular or widely used operating system. It's arguably the most important, most popular software, period, right? But for some reason they decided to get into the gaming market, building hardware, which again isn't weird because you think of PCs, but Microsoft doesn't make PCs, or if they do, they don't. That's not their main thing, right? So they released the original Xbox in 2001, which did well, but trailed behind the PlayStation 2, though it did, I think, surpass the GameCube. Just because the GameCube struggled a lot, right? Then its successor, the Xbox 360, did extremely well, at least initially. It really petered out halfway through that console generation, but like that 2005-2007 period, it was the console, far and away past the PlayStation 3 in terms of popularity. Then the successor to that, the Xbox One, even though it was the third console, it was really dumb. People made fun of it at the time. That one infamously trailed its competitors like Sony and especially Nintendo once they released the Switch in the middle of that console generation. And now with their most recent console, the Xbox Series X as well as the Series S, which is just a less powerful version of the X, that it also is playing second fiddle to the PS5 2 generations in a row, where it's the undisputed winner between at least the two of them, because Nintendo's in its own little bubble, right? The undisputed winner between the two of them is obviously Sony, right? But Xbox's Game Pass kind of makes it worth it. And if you don't know, Game Pass is kind of like Microsoft's, it's like the Netflix of gaming, is what people often compare it to. You pay a monthly subscription, you get access to all of these games, like the entire Microsoft library of content, as well as third-party content. It really is if you're someone who plays a lot of games, like I've never been able to justify it financially just because I don't play enough video games for it to really make sense for me. But if you play a lot of games and you like to try a lot of different kinds of games, for the price point, even like at the upper end, is totally worth it as opposed to buying all these games, right? But aside from that, Microsoft and Xbox has really struggled over the last decade or so since the release of the Xbox One. So moving into the handheld market makes sense, right? And I've talked about this a lot on the channel. Because by doing this, it really gives them a point of differentiation. Because Sony does have a portable console, but I think called the PlayStation Portal, but that is not a true handheld device because you have to be it's basically just streaming your PS5 to a physical to a handheld device, so you have to be within a certain proximity of it, right? So Sony doesn't have true portability. And Nintendo does, right? But neither Sony nor Nintendo is a true gaming PC, right? They are closed ecosystems where, there have been other handheld gaming PCs, and we'll talk about those in a second, that are like PCs, where you can load up any games that you can get onto your computer. You can have access to different digital storefronts. That's something even the Switch doesn't have. It's a closed ecosystem. So Microsoft kind of throwing its hat in the ring of having a true gaming PC, or a portable handheld gaming PC, is really, really important. Again, just to give it something to make it different from its competition. My argument has always been for what I just said, but then on top of that, if Xbox were to, well, I shouldn't speak hypothetically about it. Now that Xbox is doing it, what this does is, like, the pitch should be, and seems to kind of be, at least in some respects, that this is the best way to experience Xbox Game Pass. Because you can play Game Pass, you can access Game Pass on PCs and phones. Like, they really are, like, they really have leaned into this idea of everything can be an Xbox. Your TV can be an Xbox. Your phone can be an Xbox. So by making this Xbox Rogue Ally X, that's the pitch. Like, this is the best way for you to play your Xbox library of the games you have purchased, as well as access your subscription to Game Pass. And Kotaku even ran an article that had a subtitle that said, quote, "The new portable console will be a Game Pass juggernaut," end quote. So, a little proud of myself that, I'm on the same wavelength as Kotaku, right? But what's interesting here, though, is that they're not, like, making this just from scratch, right, by themselves. They're partnering with Asus, which is a Taiwanese electronics manufacturer, making computer components and things like that. They launched the Rogue brand, Rogue, ROG, standing for Republic of Gamers, but I did not know. And the brand, the subset of Asus, was primarily used for computer hardware components. And then in 2023, to compete with Valve's Steam Deck, right, they released the Rogue Ally, which essentially is just what now the Xbox Rogue Ally is going to be, right? A portable gaming PC that is it's like the Nintendo Switch. You hold it in your hand. You can dock it to your TV or to a monitor. But unlike something like the Switch or even the Steam Deck, again, it's not a closed system. The Steam Deck you can turn just into a gaming PC, but you have to kind of like mess with you have to be tech savvy. Where, like, out of the box, this is essentially a PC that just has the form factor of a handheld gaming device, right? So in terms of the features of this, it'll be running Windows 11, which a lot of people aren't happy about because apparently Windows 11 sucks. I mean, I'm a Mac guy. I only have Windows for my PC for my gaming YouTube channel, Replay Rewind, link in the description. But I think that has Windows 10 on it, and it was like a hand-me-down computer I bought on Facebook Marketplace. So, I'm not really in the Windows world, but from my understanding, Windows 11 kind of sucks, especially for like a handheld touchscreen. I don't think this has a touchscreen, but like a handheld, like not computer, not mouse and keyboard interface, it kind of sucks. It'll most likely be running on similar specs to the current Rogue Ally, which includes, a 1080p display, 120 hertz refresh rate, as well as support for variable refresh rate or VRR through FreeSync Premium. So basically that's all technical gobbledygook just to say that the visuals will be pretty strong, especially for the device at hand. There will be a dedicated button with the little Xbox logo that launches the Xbox app, right? So that's another thing that will make it different than the standard Rogue Ally. And that Xbox app will be redesigned for handheld functionality, and Windows 11 similarly. And again, unlike something like the Nintendo eShop or the Steam Deck with Steam, you'll be able to connect to and access all of your PC gaming libraries, whether it's Steam itself, Epic Game Store, GOG.com. You'll be able to access all of your stuff. So again, it's a true gaming PC. Also a random note that I think I read that Roblox will be available on the platform, and Variety notes this is the first time that the game has been playable natively and playable natively, as well as being optimized for gaming handhelds, whereas before this, I think it was just like a website that you would go to, or like a launcher on a computer. We don't have a price yet on this, but the current Rogue Ally costs about $800, which big sticker shock, right? Because the traditional, the Xbox Series X launched at $500. So it's more expensive than traditional home consoles. But it makes sense because the economics of gaming consoles has always been, you basically sell the consoles at a loss, but then you sell the games at a massive profit. So you basically get people into the ecosystem, and then you upcharge them on the games, and then that's how you make your money in the long run, right? But with something like this, especially since people could buy the thing and then never buy a game from the Xbox Game Store, they could just access their Steam libraries or whatever it might be. It makes sense that this would be a little bit more expensive, right? But again, like I've said, this is probably the best move that Xbox could make, right? And it almost seems like Microsoft is taking a page out of Nintendo's book, right? Where Nintendo, after the GameCube, Nintendo has always been different and innovative, but after the GameCube, I think they realized we can't compete with Sony or even Microsoft when it comes to console, like the tech part, the power of the console, graphics, things like that. And maybe we don't even want to. Right? So let's just do our own thing. And that's how you get the Wii, and then the Wii U, and then especially the Switch, right? Again, this idea of Xbox Anywhere, which is very different than the Nintendo Switch. Because obviously the Switch is portable, but you can't play your Nintendo library on your MacBook. You can't play, or your PC or your phone. This is very different. Obviously, there have been other gaming handheld PCs. Like we mentioned, the Rogue Ally itself, right? But this being an official partnership with one of the major traditional console manufacturers I feel like is a really big deal. And it also saves Microsoft a lot of work and time, money, time, and like the trial and error process, because they're not building this from scratch, right? They're basically just building off of the Rogue Ally. As in using that as the foundation. They don't have to go through the trial and error of the R&D. They can kind of just take what worked about the Rogue Ally, improve it where they want, and then do that. So now that Xbox has finally done this, right? Is this the warning shot now? Like, is this the warning shot in the handheld console wars? Or has it already started, right? With the Switch and then the Steam Deck and then a plethora of things like the Rogue Ally and now the Xbox Rogue Ally. Will Sony get back into the dedicated handheld space? Because of course they had the PSP, and then its successor, the PlayStation Vita, was a cult classic in a way, but did not do as well as they wanted, and they kind of abandoned it. So will Sony kind of see this and go, we need to get in on this. We need to have our own portable, if not gaming PC, something like the Switch, where or not even the Switch, but something that it's a companion to your PS5. That's probably what they'll do, because Sony's greedy, especially when they do well. Sony does their best work when they're the underdog. When they are the undisputed champions of their when it comes to PlayStation and the video game industry, it's usually when they get the most complacent. So my guess would be that they will develop a handheld, but it will be a companion to your PlayStation 5. Where you can play digital games, but it won't, it'll be some weird thing, like you won't be able to dock it, or it'll be a much poorer performance, but another thing though, they might just kind of go, we'll just be the arms suppliers. We won't even get involved in the war, because, Sony is, in the last couple of years, has made some of their games available on PC. I don't know if it's through Steam. I don't know what storefronts they're available, but you can play some of these PlayStation exclusive games on the PC. Like, the PC is almost seen as like neutral territory. So now you're gonna have a scenario where you can play PlayStation exclusives on the Xbox handheld device, because it's technically a gaming PC and it can access all of these, different games. So the lines between home console, handheld console, mobile gaming, and PCs are really starting to blur. So, again, this just makes so much business sense, and, I'm excited. I'm not going to buy this because I'm poor as shit, and I don't really need it. Again, I don't really play a lot of games, but this is a very, very cool business development for Microsoft, and it makes a lot of sense. I think this is going to be a major turning point for them. Okay, before moving on, just want to give another quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing the Muppets, which is a lot of fun, so definitely go check that out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also just find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the link down in the description below. Okay. Hold on, I'm trying to fix something here. Okay. I took my drink. Let's talk about story number 2. So Tom Felton is returning to the role that made him famous, Draco Malfoy. He's returning to play the role in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway. He's going to be joining the Broadway show starting this November for about 19 weeks, ending sometime in late March 2026. Variety notes that it's the first time, which is kind of weird to think, but it also makes sense. But Variety notes this is the first time that a member of the original film cast is reprising their role for this stage production. Felton put out a statement saying, quote, Being a part of the Harry Potter films has been one of the greatest honors of my life. Joining this production will be a full circle moment for me because when I begin performances in Cursed Child this fall, I'll also be the exact age Draco is in the play. It's surreal to be stepping back into his shoes and, of course, his iconic platinum blonde hair, and I'm thrilled to be able to see, and I'm thrilled to be able to see his story through and to share it with the greatest fan community in the world. I look forward to joining this incredible company and being a part of the Broadway community, end quote. I also got quotes here from the producers of the show, Sonia Friedman and Colin Callender, saying, quote, As fans of the wizarding world ourselves, we feel incredibly fortunate to welcome Tom into our Cursed Child family on Broadway and to offer Harry Potter fans around the globe the once-in-a-lifetime excitement of seeing him reprise this iconic role, this time on stage in New York City. This moment is powerful on many levels. Tom will be making his Broadway debut and is marking a full circle moment for not just himself, but for Draco too. He gets to inhabit Draco once more, but this time as an adult facing the relatable challenges of parenthood and the complicated meaning of legacy, end quote. So, a little bit about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. So, this is a stage sequel to the iconic book series. It takes place 19 years after the 7th book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. And it follows Harry's son. I think it's supposed to be his second son. I didn't know he had more than one son. Harry's son, Albus Severus Potter, who goes to Hogwarts, but he gets sorted into Slytherin. Oh no! And it starts this whole chain of events. My roommate in college was really into Harry Potter, and he was telling me about this play and how it's very polarizing and is very uneven. And he basically walked me through the whole plot. And I don't remember it, really. I remember there was time travel kind of involved with the time stoppers from, I think, what was it, the third book? But he was not very impressed by it, and I was not very impressed by it. But nevertheless, it's been running on Broadway. It started in the West End in London, but it's been on Broadway since 2018. So for, what is that, 7 years? So it's been on the scene for quite some time. Originally it was told in 2 parts. So it would be like you would come in the afternoon and then come back in the evening for part 2, or sometimes even like you would see part 1 in one evening and then come back the next night for part 2. It was later truncated, at least on Broadway. I think in West End it's still in 2 parts. In the Broadway version, it's been truncated into a single 3.5-hour production. Though I imagine with an intermission of some kind, because that's a really long time. But I don't have confirmation of that. But of course, Harry Potter is a book series, so they couldn't pass up the opportunity to publish the script in print, almost as like an 8th Harry Potter book. And J.K. Rowling, who did not write this, by the way, she wrote this. I think she has story credits, but it was not written by her. She described it as like the 8th Harry Potter story, in a lot of ways. So, but like I kind of mentioned, it polarized critics and fans. Critics were kind of mixed. They were impressed by the spectacle and the production value. Fans seem to be way more split. And from my research and understanding, where you fell on liking it or not liking it, depending on if you saw it on stage in person or you just read the printed script. And the people who didn't like it, who just read the script, criticized the play for reading almost like fan fiction. It doesn't really feel like the 8th Harry Potter story. It just feels like, oh yeah, here's this also like addendum that happens 20 years later, right? So all of this to say, and I've talked about this a lot on this channel, especially since they're really getting the HBO Harry Potter reboot underway with casting and things like that. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, this no shade. I like Harry Potter. Harry Potter is a irrelevant franchise gasping for relevancy. Their attempts, Warner Brothers attempts to continue the film series with a prequel series, Fantastic Beasts. That was a disaster. The first film was fine and people liked it fine, but each film from the second one to the third one just got worse and worse. They're now, like I said, trying to do this new HBO show where they're going to adapt each book again, but this time now with the length of a television season, they can, adapt things more faithfully. But really this show, because I think that first Fantastic Beasts movie came out, when did that come out? Like, I was in college, I think. Or no, was I not in college? Yeah, I was in college. It came out in 2016, in the fall of 2016. So after that, though, this show, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, is really one of the few things currently keeping the franchise and really, I should say, the brand alive, right? And, this move to bring back an original actor from the films is stunt casting at its basic. You know what I mean? I would not be covering this if they just casted a well-known actor to play Draco Malfoy. I'm talking about this because it's an attempt to get people interested. But I think it's an indictment of the fact that I think they're aware that they don't really have much new to add. Right? So they have to go back to the well of, people will recognize him, so it'll be more meaningful, it'll get people more interested. And again, like I said, I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't him, right? So they did their job. And Tom Felton's a good actor, I guess, but again, it's very obvious what they're trying to do. And again, on top of all of this, there's the J.K. Rowling of it all with her militant transphobia, which has led people to kind of reevaluate the quality of even the original material. So, and I think that also Tom Felton has gotten into some trouble recently talking about being excited to come back to the franchise and kind of downplaying J.K. Rowling's comments, which made a lot of people upset. But again, it's I'm sure this will be interesting, especially if you're a Harry Potter fan. This is like a wet dream, right? But I think we still, I think it's a very naked admission of Warner Brothers' attempts, or just, the Harry Potter franchise as a whole, its attempts to court interest again, by going back to basics. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 3. So AMC theaters, they make movies better, if you didn't know. They will be showing commercials before their films. They're partnering with National Cinemedia, a company that, facilitates movie theater advertising, and then between AMC and National Cinemedia, they're going to share the revenues. This is going to start July 1st. So get ready, just in less than a month. And AMC put out a statement saying, quote, "Our participation delivers us vital revenue as we continue on our recovery path and allows us to continue offering significant value on ticket prices through incentives like Discount Tuesday, 20% off matinee pricing, and the upcoming 50% off Wednesday ticketing program," end quote. So to really understand what this is and why they're doing this, you really just need to understand the movie theater business model. Because I think a lot of people just don't think about it a lot. It's something so ingrained, even though movies are dying and going to movie theaters is dying. It's still an American institution, right? Well, a world institution, but especially it's very normal for Americans, especially in the summertime, to escape the heat, to go to a movie theater. And there's really 3 core components to the revenue of a movie theater. The ticket sales themselves, which is the most obvious one, right? That most people would think that's how they make their money. Concessions, right? It's not just there to make a little extra scratch. If anything, that's the primary. I forget who this was, and this was like a decade ago. So, and it was like the CEO of AMC or Regal or one of these who said, "We're not in the movie business, we're in the candy business." When you get your $8 popcorn, that bag of popcorn probably costs 3 cents to make or something between the bag and the kernels and the labor to make it. Like, it's very, very cheap. So the business model is to have the upcharge, because they have to split the ticket revenue, obviously, with the movie studios, the people who made the movie. So really concessions. But then there's this third other source of revenue that is becoming more and more prominent, and that is advertising, specifically commercials, right? Because, like I joked earlier, but it's true and it's sad. It's the theatrical exhibition industry it's a declining market, right? I don't think there's gonna be a rebound. It's just an issue of how fast it happens. There will always be movie theaters, but they're going to get to the point where it's not quintessentially American to go to the movie theater, right? It'll the same way going to any theater is not it's not something that everybody does frequently, right? So it's a declining market. So what are these companies, what are they supposed to do? Well, they have to find ways to make up for that declining revenue however they can. So and I think they even said in one of their statements, that they one of the reasons why they're doing this is that this is a way to increase revenue without increasing the base ticket prices, which is, again, the obvious solution if you're the movie theater, right? Like, ridiculous money, let's just increase the price of the tickets. But I think they know well enough that that's not going to work, because they're struggling to get people to come to the movies in the first place. So making it more expensive probably isn't going to help them all that much. And again, AMC, this is not like new for movie theaters, right? Regal Cinemas has been doing this for a while. It just seems weird, or it's a big deal because it's AMC, right? It's a legacy theater chain. Obviously, the name has changed a bunch of times, but you can trace AMC back to like the 1920s, like the heyday of like the golden age of Hollywood, right? And there's a certain level of prestige. Against American movie theaters at the multiplex really suck in terms of the quality. They've been getting a lot better over the last decade in terms of improving the seats, improving the quality of the exhibition itself. But it's still like a cheap movie theater chain, right? But of the cheap movie theater chains, AMC is kind of like the best, right? The best food, the best screen quality, like movie quality, the best food, just the best everything, really, right? It's like Coke versus Pepsi, right? Coke is, and it's funny because AMC partners with Coke and then Regal partners with Pepsi. So they pair up with their equivalents in the soda industry, right? So there's like a certain level of prestige, if you can call it that. And, AMC, the New York Times notes in their article about this that AMC like explicitly rejected this idea of doing something like this back in 2019. But in this announcement for this new move by them, AMC said, quote, "While AMC was initially reluctant to bring this to our theaters, our competitors have fully participated for more than 5 years without any direct impact to their attendance. This is a strong indication that this NCM, National Cinemedia, pre-show initiative does not negatively influence movie-going habits," end quote. So yeah, like when you go and you get there early, there might just be like random commercials, which, I mean, like, it's really whatever, because otherwise they would just be playing, like, those weird, like, trivia games that suck. So if I'm the theater, like, as a consumer, I'm like, I'm not going to pay attention to either. So you may as well do the thing that's going to make you more money, so that way you don't have to raise my ticket prices, right? But this is going to be really important, right? And we've already been living in the attention economy, but it's even more true now than it's ever been. And with a movie screening, you have a captive audience, and that's incredibly valuable for advertisers. And it's not as pinpoint as something like digital advertising through Google and on YouTube, social media, streaming. It's not going to be as pinpoint as that, but based off the movie, you have an idea of the audience roughly, right? So you're not going to be advertising things for 60 plus white men, 60 years or older white men, if it's a movie that's really targeted towards the 25 to 34 people of, like Hispanic community, right? So I think there's some real revenue making opportunities here. And again, based off the data that they reference, and I can speak for myself, it hasn't made me want to go to the movies less. It's just kind of like, oh, that's kind of annoying. But, like, what else would there be? It would either be this or a black screen sitting at, like, waiting for, like, the trailers to start. So, you know, I'm all for this. I know some people are like, what the fuck? But I think it's kind of whatever. Okay, before going on, I just want to give another quick plug to another YouTube channel I have called Peter Squared, where I also cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between using these cartoon versions of myself. It was a lot of fun to make. Hopefully it's a lot of fun to watch. You can go comment and let me know why you disagree with everything I say in the video. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So Warner Brothers Discovery plans to perform some mitosis, right? Remember in biology class in high school, mitosis, you have the cell and it goes like, shloop, right? It becomes 2 new cells. Warner Brothers is planning to do the same by dividing itself into 2 different publicly traded entities. This process is expected to be completed by mid-2026, and the split is more or less going along the lines of the streaming and production studios side of things, and then the global networks is what they're calling it, but really like all the cable assets. So the streaming and studios, that will keep David Zaslav pictured here, who's the current CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. It'll keep him as its head, and it'll include divisions of the company such as Warner Brothers Television, Warner Brothers Motion Picture Group, DC Studios, HBO Max, and the film and television libraries. On the flip side, the global networks side of things, that will be headed by Warner Brothers Discovery CFO Gunnar Weidenfels? I apologize. And the thing about this entity is that it's basically going to get saddled with all of the debt, with a bulk of Warner Brothers Discovery's debt, which is about 38 billion with a B dollars. But it'll have all the cable channels and Discovery Plus, that streaming service. And so that company definitely gets the short end of the stick, right? Because this isn't like a split up of 2 perfectly valuable assets. It's really like, here's all the good stuff we're gonna put in this bucket and all the shit stuff we're gonna put in the other bucket. I got a quote here from David Zaslav saying, quote, "The cultural significance of this great company and the impactful stories it has brought to life for more than a century have touched countless people all over the world. It's a treasured legacy we will proudly continue in this next chapter of our celebrated history. By operating as 2 distinct and optimized companies in the future, we are empowering these iconic brands with the sharper focus and strategic flexibility they need to compete most effectively in today's evolving media landscape," end quote. Similarly, another quote here from Weidenfels saying, quote, "This separation will invigorate each company by..." That's not true. "This separation will invigorate each company by enabling them to leverage their strengths and specific financial profiles. This will also allow each company to pursue important investment opportunities and drive shareholder value. At Global Networks, we will focus on further identifying innovative ways to work with distribution partners to create value for both linear and streaming viewers globally, while maximizing our network assets and driving free cash flow," end quote. And the markets didn't really know what to make of this. The stock initially surged on the news, but then it dropped a couple hours later. So I think what that's telling us is that this is obviously the right move, but it's still bad optics. It's still like not good for the company. The same way like getting a, divorce from someone you really shouldn't be married to is probably the right thing to do at the end of the day, but there's gonna be a lot of not growing pains, but there's going to be things that are not going to be pleasant to go through doing that process, right? And that's how I kind of read this situation. So Warner Brothers Discovery is a weird corporate entity because it's the result of a merger between Warner Media and Discovery Incorporated. Warner Media itself was the result of a merger between Warner Communications and Time Inc. back in 1990, making Time Warner, which went through different, parent companies, eventually got acquired by AT&T in 2018, but then was spun out in 2022 to merge with Discovery. Speaking of Discovery, it was established in the early 80s, and of course was most famous for the Discovery Channel, nature documentaries, things like that. So this move, and one of the things they mentioned at the time of the merger back in 2022 was leaning into the cable assets of Discovery. So it was like a big bet on cable television. But anyone in 2022, anyone in 2012 could have told you that cable was in decline. So this was a really big bet on cable television. And most people agree that the merger has more or less been a failure. And this announcement basically solidifies that. If anyone was unsure of the validity or the strength of that merger, I think it's very clear that is gone, right? Because of course cable television has only declined in relevancy and value. And I did some quick math. This is like broad, just I rounded here, but the stock has gone from roughly $25 from when the merger happened down to $10, give or take a couple, cents, tens of cents, one way or the other, right? That's a big drop, right? It's more than half. And one of the big reasons for this is that, the financials have been a problem, but also just the optics have not been good. David Zaslav has just been a disaster as a CEO for this company. Because he came in through Discovery. He led Discovery since 2006, and then he oversaw this merger. In a lot of ways, it wasn't even a merger. It was more of like an acquisition by Discovery. And the thing about David Zaslav is that he has like zero regard for the creative process. Infamously, canceling completed films, not just one, but several. Batgirl, that Looney Tunes movie. There was a Scooby-Doo sequel to that other animated movie that came out a couple years ago. These were completed films. These weren't in production or in development. These were completed, just had some post-production stuff to finish up. He canceled them for the tax write-off, right? A completed movie. So very little regard for the creative process. And isn't it so great that he's running one of the most historic film studios in Hollywood history? Right? Isn't that fun? And so the whole thing has just been a clusterfuck. But then on top of it, one of the strongest cable assets you can have is the rights to stream sports, right? Or to broadcast sports, I should say. Well, Warner Brothers doesn't have that either, right? They infamously they lost their long-held rights to broadcast NBA games on TV. I think they lost the rights to Amazon. So, like, the cable is really just an albatross around its neck, right? So this was a bad idea from the start, but it is only the situation or the conditions have only gotten worse for a Warner Brothers Discovery type company. But again, this reflects a changing industry. This very much emulates a strategy that's being employed by another big conglomerate, Comcast, right? Who of course owns NBC and Universal. They announced, I did a story about it on this channel. They were spinning off their cable assets, except Bravo, right? Because of Real Housewives, because that's valuable enough. So again, them doing this essentially is an admission that cable is dead. That they would rather spin it off and have it be bought or merged with somebody else rather than hold on to it. Not necessarily related to the whole cable thing, but Paramount, another historic studio, has been sold to, assuming the government lets it go through, right? Paramount has been sold or is going to be merged. It's kind of like Discovery, right? It's like acquisition / merger with Skydance Media. Obviously a much newer company. And this strategy, like with Comcast, it makes it easier for either entity to be sold to or merge with another company, right? Because Warner Brothers Discovery as it was is just too bloated. It's just going to be too expensive, but it's not worth it for the price point. So kind of splitting things up so that someone, if they really just want the cable assets, they can just go after the cable assets. And I have a quote here from a media executive who spoke anonymously, coward, who spoke to The Wrap, saying, quote, "Anyone who thinks that Warner HBO thing is going to continue as an independent company is missing what's going on here. That thing is extremely attractive. It's small enough in net value for any of those streamers, Netflix, Amazon, even Disney, to buy it, which they will," end quote. So this media executive seems pretty confident that, by the end of this decade, right, JFK, we plan to buy Warner Brothers by the end of this decade. In the next couple of years, Warner Brothers is going to be owned by one of these other companies, which I don't know if Disney would want to do this because they already fucked around and found out with by buying Fox in preparation for the streaming wars, but then poorly deployed this massive library of content. And by poorly deployed, I mean like didn't really deploy it. Like it's, you know, you would think this huge of 20th Century Fox's library, it would be like, oh my god, that's such a great value proposition, having all of that content and all of Disney's content all available. But it's still kind of, you know, it's still all scattered around, right? I feel like Disney has learned its lesson, and they wouldn't want to buy Warner Brothers. But a Netflix or an Amazon? I mean, Amazon already bought MGM. I could still see them doing it. So the out of those three, I think the most likely would be Netflix. Just because it would be it would just be a big middle finger to the legacy film industry of Netflix saying like, yeah, that's right. Now we own you. We competed with you. Now we own you. Right. So what's the focus now for Warner Brothers? Again, really focusing on the core Warner Brothers film studio, DC, and HBO, right? Those are really the three main selling points of a post Warner Brothers Discovery Warner Brothers, which is essentially just the pre Warner Brothers Discovery Warner Brothers, but now not having those cable assets. Because this also would include CNN, right? So maybe it won't even be like someone buys each of these two companies. They'll just be sold for parts, right? So someone will take CNN, someone will take TNT, TBS, all these other channels. Or TBS, is that Warner? I'm pretty sure that is, right? But so in any case, Warner Brothers is going through a little bit of a divorce right now. But this is only the beginning of the story, not the end. All right, let me grab another quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5. So a judge Louis Lyman, has thrown out Justin Baldoni's $400 million defamation lawsuit against Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, saying, quote, the Wayfarer parties, sidebar, Wayfarer is like Justin Baldoni's production company, quote, the Wayfarer parties have alleged that Reynolds and publicist Leslie Sloan made additional statements accusing Baldoni of sexual misconduct, and that the Times made additional statements accusing the Wayfarer parties of engaging in a smear campaign. But the Wayfarer parties have not alleged that Reynolds, Sloan, or the Times would have seriously doubted these statements were true based on the information available to them, as is required for them to be liable for defamation under applicable law, end quote. He basically argues that Lively's accusations of sexual harassment are legally protected, and therefore they're immune from suit, right? So he dismissed the entire lawsuit, but he is allowing Baldoni's team to amend and refile some of the allegations in relation to contract interference. Of course, this Lively's lawyers took a victory lap, saying, quote, today's opinion is a total victory and a complete vindication for Blake Lively, along with those that Justin Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties dragged into their retaliatory lawsuit, including Ryan Reynolds, Leslie Sloan, and the New York Times. As we have said from day one, this $400 million lawsuit was a sham, and the court saw right through it. We look forward to the next round, which is seeking attorney's fees, treble damages, and punitive damages against Baldoni, Sarowitz, Nathan, and the other Wayfarer parties who perpetrated this abusive litigation, end quote. So yeah, so really, pouring salt into the wound, right? Similarly, another one of these people that was being accused of defamation, the New York Times, right? A spokesperson for the legacy newspaper said, quote, we are grateful to the court for seeing the lawsuit against the New York Times for what it was, a meritless attempt to stifle honest reporting. Our journalists went out and covered carefully and fairly a story of public importance, and the court recognized that the law is designed to protect just that sort of journalism. We will continue to stand up in court for our journalism and for our journalists when their work comes under attack, end quote. So, of course, this is all part of the larger feud, the beef between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni that originated with them working together on the film adaptation of It Ends With Us. Originally there was tensions over creative differences, then it boiled over into alleged sexual harassment, and I should make clear though, sexual harassment not being in this case that he was trying to come on to her, but rather just saying things that she deemed to be inappropriate, or doing things that she deemed to be inappropriate. Lively then kind of fed her story to the New York Times, who published a kind of a profile about this whole situation. Baldoni then sued both Lively and New York Times for defamation. Lively then countersued, making her accusations her social accusations, now like legal, like suing him for it. And since then, they basically have been sparring back and forth in the court of public opinion, releasing different, evidence or statements or tactics that, are really a Rorschach test of where you kind of fall on this scale. So, like, one example is they released, like, footage from the set. Justin Baldoni's team did. And if you supported Baldoni, you go, see, he didn't do anything wrong. But then if you agree with Lively, you go, like, oh, look, she's clearly uncomfortable. So you really see what you want to see. But again, this ruling makes sense, at least when it comes for the legal requirements for defamation. Because in order to prove defamation, you have to prove that the defendant willfully disregarded the facts and acted with malice. You can't sue someone for defamation for saying something that's not true. Defamation is only legally valid as a thing you can sue someone for if they willingly lied. And not only willingly lied, but they did it for malicious reasons. But that's really hard to prove, right? Unless they have unless you have like an email chain going like, clearly this isn't true, but I hate this person, so let's run this story. Like, that would be defamation in a legal sense. This is really hard to prove that, right? So Lively has won the battle, but she has certainly not won the war, right? There's still another lawsuit. This time she's on the offense, suing him for the initial sexual harassment and retaliation concerns. And I'm really looking forward is the wrong word, but it's going to be good when this goes to trial, because unlike sparring in the court of public opinion, legal courts, there's discovery, there's evidence, there's cross-examination, which really brings to light a lot of truth, right? So she still has, there's still another battle to be fought, but I think that will be really good for all of us third parties, because it'll give us more insight into the facts. Because again, you can peacock in the press, but when it comes to the court, you are under oath, and you can't just be bringing false evidence or false testimony. You can, but if you get found out, then you could get in a lot of trouble, right? So there's still that battle, but then also this battle might not even be officially over. Baldoni is preparing new evidence. I got a quote here from his lawyer, Brian Friedman, saying, quote, "Miss Lively and her team's predictable declaration of victory is false. So let us be clear about the latest ruling. While the court dismissed the defamation-related claims, the court has invited us to amend 4 out of the 7 claims against Miss Lively, which will showcase additional evidence and refined allegations," end quote. So this might just kind of be grandstanding, just trying to save face, trying to say like, oh, if anything, this is actually good because it'll allow us to bring even more evidence. I think they're probably just figuring out what the fuck are we going to do, right? But in any case, the saga continues. I don't think this is going to be going to trial until March 2026. So we still have a long way to go, and a lot can happen between. 9 months is a long time. It's a long time. It's enough time to make a human being in a woman's belly, and it's going to be a long time, and it's enough time for this situation to get even more, this beef to get even beefier. Okay, so that wraps up the show. Just one final plug. Just want to plug Cinnamon Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where we publish written reviews for new movies coming out. It really means a lot to me if you go check that out. You can find the link to that in the description down below. You can also just go to your browser, type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like this video. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people find the channel. So if you haven't found the channel, why not subscribe? I'm trying to grow this as best I can. So maybe one day I can make a little bit of money off of this channel, monetize it, so I can get 3 cents every time someone watches it. But until next time then, peace out.